Welcome to Thought to Action, presented by the London Center for Policy Research, where we delve deeply into important issues, examine ideas, and discuss solutions, putting our thoughts into action. I'm Lieutenant Colonel retired Tony Shaffer, the president of the London Center. I have the honor of being joined by Gordon Chang, our distinguished fellow who follows and does everything regarding China. And we're now talking about continuing our series, China Red Alert. We'll be going through and talking about a number of key issues regarding this whole spectrum of threat. And if you enjoy our video, you like our content, please join our Patreon community, Patreon/Thought to Action. Patrons are available to preview our Thought to Action before everyone else. Plus, you can participate in our Ask Us Anything question and answer sessions. Also, please subscribe to Thought to Action via YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all the different social media. We're also now on Rumble. So without further ado, let's move right into today's topic. Gordon, thank you for being here today. And as always, thank you for your constant leadership regarding China.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. I really appreciate this.
So, I tweet you often. I watch everything you're doing. One of the things that I believe is notable is the amount of economic leverage that China is attempting to gain over the United States. And I'm not a financial guy, I'm a threat guy. So I don't necessarily see it as a big direct threat issue, but I think it's a big leverage issue. So Gordon, could you walk us through kind of what this means regarding the buying of treasuries and other things China is trying to do right now, the People's Republic of China, the PRC and the CCP, not Taiwan, but what you see as what they're attempting to do by this economic influence they're attempting to expand?
From the beginning of the 1980s, which is really the start of the reform era, as it's called, China has tried to obtain leverage over the US. And they've done this in ways which are above board, but mostly they've done this in ways which are surreptitious and criminal. So for instance, they steal US intellectual property to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars a year. The former director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, last December actually put the amount at about $500 billion a year. This goes hand in hand with their ability, they're trying to develop the capability to compete with us. And so they don't think that they can do that above board, and that's why they're engaging in theft and other criminal activities. They're also trying to get leverage with important communities in the United States. For instance, Wall Street, Fortune 500 boards, Walmart. And we heard this from that Chinese academic, Di Dongsheng. He had that November 28th, and it's now become infamous, lecture, where he actually talked about how, and bragging in ways which really were awful. He was bragging about how China was able to use the Wall Street connection prior to President Trump to influence decisions in the White House. And he said he looked forward to doing that in the Biden administration. So we've got to understand it's just the maliciousness of China's system.
So that brings me back to a point. Most of the audience may know this. I used to consult with the Federal Reserve. At one point back about 10 years ago, I was called in by the Chief of Staff of the Federal Reserve after he had gotten a briefing from the then Director of Cyber Command, Keith Alexander, where he was told by Keith Alexander that NSA and Cyber Command had tracked down to the seat in this directorate within Chinese intelligence in Beijing about how the Fed was being hacked into by the Chinese. Now, what was notable, Gordon, they weren't trying to shut it down. I would almost argue they were trying to do detailed reconnaissance for purposes of understanding better what the system was doing, to include hacking the Chicago Mercantile, which was a public hack. So is this a combination, if you will, of them doing deep intelligence, as well as trying then to use that intelligence to manipulate markets and influence our overall economic health?
Yeah, well, certainly that's the case. And we have seen, for instance, just recently, this Biden administration talking about how the Ministry of State Security works hand in hand with Chinese criminal ransomware hackers and other criminals. And so this is not just some sort of off the books element. This is really the Chinese central government and the Communist Party engaging in ransomware. Remember, China has the Great Firewall, which is the world's most sophisticated set of internet controls. They know all that's going on. And so, for instance, when North Korean hackers went after Sony Pictures Entertainment in 2014, they did that from Chinese IP addresses and from Chinese soil. And therefore, we should hold China accountable for all of this. So, yes, it's reconnaissance, it's theft, it's all the range of bad and dangerous activities.
So I think we all have recognized this as a threat issue. The folks on the left and the Biden administration seem to kind of acknowledge it, but not seem to actually put any weight behind it. And again, Gordon, you and I have both known each other a long time. Our experience is shared regarding the direct knowledge of the Chinese ability to go in and do things. My former think tank was constantly being targeted when we had contracts with Boeing. I mean, our servers were constantly being pinged. There's no doubt the Chinese are after intellectual property as well as to gain access to key information to give them leverage. What do we do about this? Because it seems to me that the Biden administration has completely abandoned any idea of trying to prevent them from gaining influence. And gee, I hate to bring up this guy named Hunter Biden, but it seems to me that some of the very leverage we've given the Chinese regarding economics is now being used to manipulate political leaders for purposes of now manipulating our political system.
Yeah, that's the critical point. It's not so much that the Chinese are criminals. Yes, they are. It's not so much that they're trying to overthrow our government. Yes, they're trying to do that. The big story here, Tony, is that we're not imposing costs on China. We are not protecting ourselves. And we've had a series of presidents who have decided to take either no action, that would be George W. Bush, or action that was ineffective, and that would be Barack Obama and Joe Biden. President Trump actually broke the pattern. He imposed the tariffs under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 for the theft of U.S. intellectual property. I believe that he should have gone further. And of course, there's always more he can do. But as the president of a democracy, there's only so much he can do in front of the American people. So really what we're talking about here is a failure on the part of our political class, administration in, administration out, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, and conservatives, to take those measures that are necessary. And you mentioned your conversations with the Federal Reserve. Well, that was quite some time ago, and we still haven't done anything about this.
No, Gordon, I mean, this was 10 years ago where, again, this is direct knowledge. This is not me doing research. This is me being called in by the chief of staff of the Fed saying, Keith Alexander just briefed me on the material level of breaches by China on our economic system. That was under Barack Obama. And by the way, this knowledge is not something that was not passed on. I know for a fact people are aware of this. And our own cyber command has not gone stupid overnight, although they sometimes act like it. They know this as well. So it's really disconcerting to me as my primary focus, as you know, is threat. I'm not an economics guy, but to me, one of the key things that President Trump did do is link our economic viability and success to our national security, which I've not seen any other president do. So therefore, I think we're actually on the same sheet. But with that said, is there something that we must now demand of the Biden administration relating to waking them up? How do we wake them up? Because again, I see, Gordon, God bless you, I see you out there constantly with facts trying to chip away at the narrative of the PRC. As you know, we also have, we had a recent thought to action where we talked about some other things relating to with Claudia Rosette. We were talking about Hong Kong and the weight now being pushed upon it by the PRC to diminish its independence and diminish democracy. What can we do at this point to try to stop, or at least identify in such a way to give the ability of our own side, maybe even Wall Street, the wake-up call to stop allowing China to manipulate us?
Well, just to take cyber, because there's a whole range of things. I mean, I generally believe, just because of what China's been doing, that we should not have economic trade investment ties with China, largely because they're trying to overthrow our government, and they've killed tens of thousands of Americans each year with fentanyl, hundreds of thousands of Americans with COVID-19. That's a broader story. And many people will argue that it is not politically possible. And I can certainly agree with that. But what I'm saying is necessary. But if we put that aside for the moment, we look at, for instance, the news of the day, which is the Chinese hack on Microsoft Exchange, which just occurred in March. There are a number of things that we can do, which we haven't done on these hacks. First of all, we can hack back.
Right.
I mean, we could turn off the lights, I'm sure, in some Chinese city for an hour as a message.
Yes.
I would prefer not to use cyber because I don't want to disclose our abilities.
Bingo.
And I think we should use those abilities only in emergencies. So what I would prefer doing is use economic means. So for instance, denying China the right to import certain types of goods. That would have a big effect. The other thing, Tony, is that at the end of the Trump administration, they actually started to take seriously the prohibitions in US law on the importation of goods made with forced or slave labor. And the prosecutions went up. And to the credit of the Biden team, they're doing the same thing. They're continuing this enforcement posture. Well, there's a lot more we can do because, for instance, we know that Apple, which is, likes to lecture us about all sorts of things, was actually has a relationship with a subcontractor, Lens Technology, which has been using forced and slave labor in Xinjiang, which is the northwestern part of China. Well, why are we allowing the importation of Apple products which incorporate components from Lens Technology, which is basically everything that Apple does? And you just go through Nike. Nike was having its sneakers made in a factory in Qingdao through a sub-Korean contractor, long-term contractor, that were basically a prison with Uyghurs, in other words, racial and ethnic minorities. This is horrific. So why do we allow Nike shoes into our country? So, you just go through the list. A lot of little things like that make a big difference. But as I said, just given the fundamental nature of China's challenge, I don't think we should allow any Chinese products into our country. I don't think we should allow any investments, but that's a broader question.
No, to carry on that thought, Gordon, I'm one of those that believes that we should restrict the ability of U.S. companies to cooperate with the PRC government. General Joseph Dunford, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, publicly called out Google for their disinterest in helping the United States while being Johnny on the spot, trying to help the Chinese do things to suppress free flow of information within their country. Things like that, I don't know how we permit. And that's something I think we should look at as well. Would you agree with that?
Oh, certainly. And let's take a look at Google for a second. While they were not participating in Pentagon contracts, remember they have joint ventures with Tsinghua University, which is China's MIT, as it's called, Peking University, China's Harvard, on artificial intelligence. They had those two partnerships there. They also have the Google AI Center in Beijing on, again, artificial intelligence, really important stuff. And because of China's doctrine of civil-military fusion, although these partnerships, the two partnerships and the one center, although they're nominally civilian, we know that the Chinese military has access to them if it wants. So really, this is Google working hand in hand with the Chinese military in effect. And we should not be permitting this.
Well, I said the same thing about the Wuhan lab about a year ago. As a matter of fact, I was at CPAC when I was asked the question by Epoch Times, is it possible that any civilian use and development of techniques and procedures within the Chinese labs, civilian control would be given to the military? It's like, of course, there's no firewall there. I would think the Chinese, since they can control everything within their system, would of course share any information to benefit the military. There's no reason to believe that that does not exist here, Gordon, regarding academic, commercial, or military. It's all kind of merged together to benefit the political party, the political leadership of the PRC, correct?
Correct. Well, just take the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the Chinese military. In January of last year, Beijing assigned Major General Chen Wei to head the BSL-4 unit at the Wuhan Institute. And she is described as China's top biological weapons expert. So here you have a military officer running a nominally civilian facility. And, we have the Hong Kong virologist, Li Mingyan, actually saying that all of these facilities, not just the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but across China are actually military facilities in civilian clothing. So clearly, you were absolutely right about this. And we have this controversy right now where the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, headed by Dr. Anthony Fauci, that funded EcoHealth Alliance, the New York NGO, with the understanding that a portion of those funds would be sent over to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Although Dr. Fauci says that no NIH money was ever used for gain of function research, we know the papers that have been issued from that research are gain of function, show gain of function techniques, and for the purpose of increasing the lethality and the transmissibility of viruses. So here we've been funding China's biological weapons program, and we have yet to be able to come to a consensus in this country that we should stop it.
No, I've recognized that from the moment I heard about the gain of function experiments being funded by us in China. That's all you have to say. Is like, gee, everything in China is kind of controlled by the central party. So whatever the central party has goes to the military if it benefits the military. So, and I don't think people here, Gordon, fully understand the difference, the blatant difference of what a communist society looks like and how that works regarding top-down control versus the United States having layers and firewalls between sections of the economy, sections of finance, and sections of the political parties, and section of governments. We have these things which you have to work through. There's no working through within China, within the PRC. Everything is essentially subordinated to the party. Is that I know it's kind of a simple explanation, but is that fairly accurate of how we don't seem to understand that as the American people?
That's absolutely accurate. In China, Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, believes that society must be totally dominated and totally obedient to the Communist Party, and that everybody in the Communist Party be obedient to him. So you said top down, that's absolutely right. And by the way, the Chinese military is not a state military. It is a part of the Communist Party.
Right.
So we're talking about a unitary system where it doesn't have a separate military such as we have. So it is a completely different system. We fail to comprehend the nature of the Chinese system, and therefore we end up making political decisions, national security decisions that don't take into account the nature of the Chinese system.
So Gordon, thank you for joining me. I appreciate your willingness to help us educate the public on this new series we're doing on Red Alert China, where we do feel as a think tank, and you've been with us a long time, it's more important now than ever to educate the American public on what is really going on. So obviously we're going to ask you to come back and join us on some other topics. I'd like to break down at some point some of the more militaristic and vulnerability issues relating to, I used to be a planner, believe it or not, again, regarding China back in the late 90s, where we studied vulnerabilities. And I would argue, Gordon, while we recognize and we discuss the issues of what they are doing, I don't think the Chinese have fully internalized what we could do to them if we're provoked. So I'd like to come back and talk a little bit about that down the road if you join me for that.
I would be honored to do that. So thank you very much, Tony.
Right. So Gordon, thank you again. So, and thank you all for watching and listening to Thought to Action. If you like our program and would like to help us expand and create more content, please join our Patreon community at patreon.com, Thought to Action, where you can preview Thought to Action and participate in our Ask Us Anything. And please subscribe to Thought to Action on YouTube. We also now have joined other social media. We're available across the spectrum. So please check us out, check back often for our content, and we will continue to provide detailed and I think credible information to help you all understand better the specific challenges we face regarding foreign adversaries, as well as domestic issues which the foreign adversaries are trying to affect. So thanks again. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. We'll see you again real soon on Thought to Action.